Carol Burnett's genius comedy sketches are legendary, but one episode of The Carol Burnett Show hit differently. It was so emotionally raw that everyone on set broke down crying. Something happened during filming in 1977 that touched Carol's soul deeply. Her performance was so powerful that critics called it brilliant and awards poured in. The acclaim was overwhelming, but Carol never watched that episode again, not once in 47 years. What made this performance so hard for Carol that she couldn't watch it again? Let's learn about the story behind this remarkable yet heartbreaking TV moment. The episode she really hated. A 1977 episode of The Carol Burnett Show took an unexpected turn that shook everyone to their core. The Carol Burnett Show Tonight broadcasts usually brought laughter, but this particular sketch stripped away the comedy to reveal something raw and vulnerable. This dark version of The Gong Show featured Carol as Eunice Higgins, a character audiences knew from The Family sketches. The performance stood apart from her usual work. She set aside the exaggerated mannerisms and punchlines that defined the role. The audience watched as Eunice entered a talent competition, hoping to sing her way out of her disappointing life. The sketch hit hard because of the judges' cruel mockery. Real-life game show host Alan Luton played a judge who tore into her character. The audience watched Eunice's hopes shatter live on stage. The camera pulled back slowly on her tear-stained face without music or applause. Just pure heartbreak. Carol never watched the episode again. "It was too real," she said. She opened up more in a 2010 interview. "Eunice's pain was mine because it was real." This deeply personal connection led to her decades-long decision to avoid revisiting the performance. The studio fell silent after filming wrapped. The usually energetic set came to a standstill. Many crew members cried. Even the writers who celebrated successful comedy sketches seemed stunned by what they had witnessed. Critics praised the performance unanimously despite Carol's personal struggles with it. They called it groundbreaking, revolutionary, and a perfect blend of comedy and drama that proved television could be art. The sketch won awards and secured its place in television history. Her dramatic turn showed a different side to the performer known for iconic comedy pieces like the Carol Burnett Gone with the Wind skit. This single episode gained almost mythical status among Carol's extensive Carol Burnett filmography. The performance revealed emotional depths beneath her comedic persona, setting it apart from her Carol Burnett 1950s work and the familiar humor associated with the Carol Burnett Show logo. The sketch's influence reached beyond that broadcast. It sparked a 1982 TV movie about Eunice and led to the spin-off sitcom Mama's Family. Carol stepped back from these projects, drawing a line between her comedy and this emotional territory. She later told Harper's Bazaar, "I'm glad we did it, but that's not what the show is for. We're here to make people forget their troubles, not to relive their pain." This revealed her entertainment philosophy. Though capable of powerful dramatic work, she stayed true to comedy's healing nature. Those close to Carol say she avoided rewatching the episode to protect herself from its emotional intensity, not from perfectionism or fear of criticism. Unlike other performers who repeatedly analyzed their work, she acknowledged its power without experiencing it again. That night in 1977 exceeded mere entertainment. Television captured a rare moment of absolute truth, a performer showing complete vulnerability to millions. Carol's inability to rewatch it shows just how personal that truth became. What made the 1977 sketch so emotionally devastating? The 1977 sketch stands out from the playful humor that defined most of the Carol Burnett Show Tonight broadcasts. This piece took a different path from the familiar comedy that had made Burnett a household name since her Carol Burnett 1950s days. The sketch stepped away from episodes with the loud Harper family and put these beloved characters in a raw, realistic scenario. Eunice Harper, played by Burnett, showed up as a contestant on a parody of The Gong Show. The story hit harder because real-life game show faces were there. Actual Gong Show host Chuck Barris ran the show, and genuine TV personality Alan Ludden sat on the judging panel. Alan Ludden, Betty White's husband. At the time, White sometimes played Eunice's stuck-up sister Ellen was one of the judges who heartlessly gonged Eunice during her performance. Eunice tried to sing Feelings, the hit song Morris Albert first performed in 1974. The team stripped away all the usual comedy safety nets. No punchlines, funny voices, or big gestures showed up. These usually protected viewers from the harsh realities being mocked. The audience saw something new on a comedy variety show, a woman having an emotional breakdown on stage without any humor to soften the blow. The show's technical choices made the emotional punch even stronger. The camera slowly pulled back on Eunice's tear-stained face as the studio lights went dim. This created a rare moment of raw vulnerability on TV, especially for a comedy show. Eunice Higgins always had deep layers under her funny exterior. She wore her trademark green fluttery dress with a 1940s perm and lived as a working-class homemaker with a fierce, unstoppable personality. She would lose control in dramatic ways and rant, mostly because of her controlling, emotionally abusive mother. This sketch stood out because it dropped the usual over-the-top comedy to show the raw truth of Eunice's character. Through all the family sketches, we saw Eunice as deeply unhappy and bitter-crushed by her mother's treatment. Her emotional instability led to destructive outbursts as she chased approval she never got. In the Carol Burnett filmography, this performance took a different road from famous comedy bits like the Carol Burnett Gone with the Wind skit. The gut punch came from watching Eunice chase her entertainment dreams only to face soul-crushing public shame. This dark moment became a cornerstone of the show's legacy. The sketch sparked a 1982 TV movie called Eunice, and later grew into the spin-off sitcom Mama's Family. A painful dramatic scene turned into successful spin-off shows, proving how much the character struck a chord with viewers. The Carol Burnett show logo ran for 11 years, striking a perfect balance between comedy and honest moments. This sketch broke new ground for a variety show and showed how comedy and tragedy live right next to each other when performers give everything to emotional truth. How Burnett's childhood shaped her reaction. Carol Burnett's profound reaction to the 1977 sketch stems from her early life experiences that altered the map of her emotions long before the Carol Burnett show logo became an American television icon. Her story of vulnerability started with a childhood filled with struggles and resilience. These elements would later stimulate both her comedic genius and exceptional dramatic abilities. Carol Burnett was born April 26, 1933 in San Antonio, Texas. Her life has been filled with misery since the beginning. Her parents, both drinkers, were unable to care for her. Her father worked at a movie theater, but he could not keep a job for long. Her mother drank just as much and was emotionally distant. Both would subsequently die of alcohol-related illnesses. Carol had already experienced the feeling of being undesired by the time she was a child. The individuals who were supposed to love her the most picked bottles over bedtime tales. It was a lonely and uncertain world. Carol discovered early on that laughing might save her from breaking. Carol was raised by her maternal grandmother, Mabel White, when her parents abandoned her. In 1940, they relocated from Texas to Hollywood. However, there was no red carpet waiting. They lived in a tight room in a dilapidated boarding house surrounded by other damaged people, addicts, mentally unstable tenants, and those on welfare who are famished but yet hopeful. Carol and her grandma lived on $20 each week, just enough to eat, let alone dream. But Mabel offered Carol something she had never had before: unconditional affection. She was impoverished, true, but she was finally secure. Carol devised an escape plan amidst the turmoil. She developed a fictitious twin sister named Karen. Karen was the polar opposite of Carol, confident, gorgeous, and constantly smiling. Carol created her so genuine that the other tenants thought she existed. She'd dash up the fire escape, change her clothing and hair, and then return as Karen, lovely and amusing. Minutes later, she'd return as Carol. The fact that these adults, many of whom were barely surviving on their own, believed it speaks volumes about Carol's acting ability and how much everyone in that house needed something happy to believe in. However, some escapes seemed more realistic than others. Every Saturday, Carol and her grandma went to the movies. Tickets cost 25 cents for two, which represents more than 10% of their weekly income. Carol had left behind the peeling paint, yelling, and terror for a few hours. On screen, life gleamed. Stars danced and folks kissed. There was food, beauty, and organization. But as the credits rolled, survival came back into focus. They couldn't afford toilet paper at home, so they'd sneak it from the cinema restroom. They were not ashamed. They were desperate. Carol, at 7 years old, knew what it meant to be hungry for more than just food. One day, while sitting in the darkened theater, she heard Johnny Weissmuller's iconic Tarzan shout reverberate across the auditorium. It struck her like lightning. At home, she became obsessed with replicating it, nailing every pitch and beat. She had no clue she was honing her voice and developing the breath control that most singers take years to perfect. It was only a game, but it became a signature. That outburst would eventually cause crowds to laugh and applaud during her live appearances. What began as a child's mimicry evolved into one of her first comedic skills. Carol had only one dream when she graduated from high school to work in journalism. Her mother had always aspired to be a writer, and Carol felt bound to complete what her mother couldn't. UCLA was the aim. However, when it came time to enroll, she was confronted with a harsh reality. She did not have the $50 required to finance tuition. That's around $600 now. For most individuals, that would have meant the end, and for a time it appeared to be. Then, something unusual occurred. A stranger whose name she had never discovered stepped in and paid the money. There are no ties attached, no explanations, only enough money to alter her life. She intended to pursue journalism at UCLA, but an optional theater class changed her life. In that room, something within her clicked. She was no longer bashful. She was not impoverished or invisible. She was humorous, noisy, and fully lived. Her instructors noticed it. Her peers did as well. She could sing, act, and make people laugh all in one breath. Journalism seemed too little for her. She switched majors. It was hazardous. However, for the first time in her life, she was not surviving. She was dreaming. This gamble paid off immediately. At the end of her first year, UCLA's theater school named her the most promising newcomer. It was more than just a title. It was a prophecy. It informed her she wasn't insane for pursuing her ambition. It inspired her to work harder to take the stage seriously and to stop apologizing for seeking more than just survival. The honor opened doors for her, resulting in bigger roles in school plays and mentors who recognized her uniqueness. She was not simply another aspiring actor. She had an unmistakable spark. Carol Burnett was a college junior in 1954, working as an usherette for 65 cents per hour, when her life took an unexpected turn during a party in San Diego. She was not there to celebrate. She was cramming hors d'oeuvres into her pocketbook to carry home for her grandma. That's when a well-dressed stranger approached her. He was not in show business. He was a rich shipbuilder from La Jolla. Carol told him she wanted to travel to New York and make it on Broadway, but she couldn't afford UCLA's $43 tuition. The man offered her an offer that seemed too good to be true, $1,000 for her and her boyfriend, Don Soroyan. But he did give them 3 rules. Never divulge his name. Only use the money to get to New York. If they were successful, they had to help others succeed as well. He did not seek credit. He just stated that he had been assisted before and was now paying it forward. His wife later revealed that he had done similar work for petrol businesses, restaurants, and others pursuing their goals. Carol and Don departed UCLA with the $2,000 in hand. They traveled east in 1954 despite Carol's lack of experience beyond Texas. She didn't know anyone in New York, and she didn't care. She subsequently stated, "I didn't know enough to be scared." They arrived in the city and checked into the Algonquin Hotel for $9 per night. It was too much. The money started going quickly. Carol fell down weeping while making a communal call to her family, who asked her to return. Then, just as she was about to give up, she heard a radio announcement. A hurricane dubbed Carol was making its way up the coast. She viewed it as a sign. It somehow strengthened her resolve to stay. She quickly found herself in an entirely other world, the rehearsal club. It was an antique boarding home for young women who wanted to pursue careers in the arts. Carol paid $18 a week for a cot in a shared room with 4 other actresses. There was only one bathroom and one closet, but she considered it heaven. She had been sleeping on a couch at home. The area was alive with excitement. Girls are practicing lines, singing, and running around with curlers on their hair. Carol made ends meet by working as a hat check lady at night and auditioning during the day. It was not flashy, but it was authentic. These experiences taught her about human weakness and the fine line between hoping and feeling let down. The Gong Show parody featuring Eunice Higgins mirrors what Burnett saw in her childhood. Eunice stood exposed and vulnerable to judgment, much like Carol had watched her parents lose their dignity to alcoholism. Her 1977 performance came from real emotional scars that never healed completely. When I played Eunice in that sketch, Burnett said in an interview about the Carol Burnett Show Tonight episode, "I wasn't just playing a character. I was remembering how it felt to watch someone you love become someone you barely recognize." Young Carol found powerful ways to cope with her unstable childhood. Movie theaters in 1940s Hollywood became her sanctuary. Each ticket bought her a brief escape from reality. These silver screen stories planted early seeds of her theatrical dreams well before her Carol Burnett 1950s career began. She learned more than entertainment in those dark theaters. She studied actresses like Judy Garland and Bette Davis, absorbing their emotional range. This early exposure explains the remarkable depth she brought to performances like the 1977 sketch, a dramatic talent rarely seen among variety show performers. Her imagination became another refuge at home. She created characters and stories which helped develop her keen eye for detail and perfect timing. These skills would later define her Carol Burnett filmography. She learned to turn pain into performance, connecting with audiences through genuine emotion beneath the comedy. This background sheds light on why the Eunice sketch affected her deeply. Her famous Carol Burnett, Gone with the Wind skit showed her comedic genius, but Eunice revealed the emotional core that supported all her comedy. The sketch brought back memories of her parents' humiliation and her childhood fears of rejection, making it too painful to watch again. Burnett often talks about how her difficult early years gave her the emotional depth for her performances. The authenticity that made the 1977 sketch so powerful came with a personal price. She had to tap into emotional wounds she'd spent years trying to heal. "I learned early that you can find humor in almost anything," Burnett reflected, "but sometimes the pain behind the laughter is too real to revisit." Why the sketch felt too personal for Burnett. The vibrant Carol Burnett Show logo masked a deeper truth. Carol Burnett's connection to the 1977 Gong Show sketch touched her soul more than her audience knew. Her emotional response came from something more profound than artistic dedication. It reached into her deepest personal vulnerabilities. Eunice Higgins became more than just another character in Burnett's Carol Burnett filmography. She managed to keep clear boundaries between her comedic roles and private life. But Eunice was special. This character, her favorite from the show, reflected her own hidden insecurities. "I always had a weak chin because we couldn't afford to correct my bite, which could have been corrected with braces." Burnett shared about her physical insecurities. "I always kind of hated my profile, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice someday to feel the rain on your chin without having to look up?" This personal revelation explains why Eunice's public humiliation in the talent show sketch affected her deeply. Eunice's desperate search for validation mirrored Burnett's own quest for acceptance. Success had taken her far beyond her Carol Burnett 1950s roots, yet that fear of rejection stayed buried in her mind. People described Eunice as generally very unhappy and bitter, distraught and broken down by her mother, and very emotionally unstable and going on many destructive fits. These traits weren't random comedy choices. They reflected emotional states Burnett knew from her childhood. The Gong Show sketch differed from famous moments like the Carol Burnett Gone with the Wind skit. Burnett had to remove her protective humor layers. She stood exposed before her audience without exaggerated accents or dramatic reactions. Critics described the character as a tragically white trash mother of two whose dreams of stardom, happiness, and fulfillment were dashed, words that without doubt touched Burnett's own experiences. "Before we were going to take, one of us said, Just for fun, let's do a run-through of this without doing the accents and without going over the top. Let's do it. Like it would be for real people. And we did, and it was devastating. Burnett's quote reveals why she couldn't watch this sketch again. The performance moved beyond entertainment when they removed the comedic shields. Raw, emotional truth emerged instead. This unplanned dramatic moment exposed vulnerabilities on a show meant to create laughter. That Carol Burnett Show Tonight episode hit hard because it showed more than humiliation. The audience witnessed someone's deepest hopes crumbling. Burnett had seen this pain before through her parents' shattered dreams broken by alcoholism and poverty. She had built her career by bringing joy to others. Playing Eunice without comedy revealed the pain behind her cheerful mask. This dramatic turn showed how comedy often shields us from life's harsh realities. Eunice's character tries to please her mother, but she is never satisfied, and nags Eunice to the point where she becomes irate and so agitated she goes into screaming fits. This relationship echoed Burnett's childhood experiences, making the sketch feel like a painful memoir rather than just acting. The 1977 sketch remains unique in Burnett's long career. The line between performer and performance vanished completely. She had become skilled at transformation, but this unexpected merger of character and self proved too personal to watch again whatever praise it received. How the cast and crew responded to the performance, the studio atmosphere that night in 1977 felt different from any previous Carol Burnett Show Tonight broadcast. A routine taping turned into something deeply moving as the sketch went on. Nobody who was there would ever forget it. The cameras rolled during the Gong Show parody. The usual loud laughter from Carol Burnett Show tapings faded away into complete silence. After filming, wrapped in eerie quiet pervaded the room. The audience came expecting their weekly laughs but sat frozen in their seats. They couldn't process the raw emotion they had just seen. Crew members who worked with Carol since her Carol Burnett 1950s early days stood still. These TV veterans, tough from years of production work, couldn't hide their emotions. Several of the male crew members had tears streaming down their faces, quite different from the usual fun atmosphere linked to the Carol Burnett Show logo. The typical post-show buzz disappeared right after taping ended. A respectful quiet took its place. The crew stayed away from Burnett's dressing room. Nobody knew what to say about what they had seen. Some thought she might quit, while others wondered if she would pull the episode. The cast usually broke character during funny sketches, especially during Tim Conway's famous improvisations. This time, they stayed quiet. Nothing like moments from the Carol Burnett Gone with the Wind skit where cast members could barely stop laughing. The sketch got amazing praise when it aired, maybe because it struck such a deep chord. Critics called the performance brilliant. They saw it as a defining TV moment. Reviews celebrated its courage and depth, calling it revolutionary for variety television. TV critics noted how the sketch showed comedy programs could do more than just entertain. Some called it a defining moment for variety shows that changed what these programs could achieve. Awards poured in, adding new depth to Burnett's Carol Burnett filmography. This success proved that the nation's favorite clown was also a dramatic actress of profound depth. The critics loved it, but Carol felt emotionally drained by the experience. Their masterpiece left her with personal scars that no award could heal. This gap between public praise and private pain showed how complex this piece was in Burnett's career. The episode aired just once, but its effects rippled through TV for decades. It showed how comedy could carry serious weight and that viewers were hungry for something real. This groundbreaking approach let future shows mix humor and heartbreak in ways nobody thought possible until Burnett showed how to do it. Carol Burnett challenged what TV variety shows could do. She revealed the amazing talent that always lived beneath her funny exterior. What happened to the sketch after it aired? The 1977 performance left an emotional earthquake in its wake, and this remarkable Carol Burnett Show Tonight sketch created ripples that would last for years. Critics loved it, but the story that followed took an unexpected turn. Carol Burnett did something no one expected right after the taping. She asked network executives not to show the sketch again. Her request showed just how much the performance had touched her personally. The network ended up airing it anyway, as they saw its exceptional quality despite Burnett's concerns. The sketch rarely appeared in syndicated packages because Burnett always passed on it. She managed to keep this personal boundary for almost 5 decades and refused to watch what she called too real. This made the sketch a rare gem in television history, a legendary performance that viewers could watch only once. Despite winning awards and critical praise, you wouldn't find the sketch in Carol Burnett show logo compilation collections. This was quite different from famous comedy pieces like the Carol Burnett Gone with the Wind skit, which showed up regularly in highlight reels. This heart-wrenching sketch gave birth to one of TV's most successful comedy franchises. The Family sketches appeared 31 times throughout the show, and viewers couldn't get enough of these character dynamics. The success led to a 1982 TV movie called Eunice, which dug deeper into the Harper family's story. The franchise grew into a full sitcom called Mama's Family in 1983, with Vicki Lawrence playing her famous role as Thelma "Mama" Harper. Mama's Family had its own interesting journey. NBC ran the show until they canceled it in 1984. The show bounced back in the first-run syndication from 1986 to 1990 and became the highest-rated sitcom in that format. The shift from sketch comedy to sitcom meant Mama's character needed some changes. She evolved from being a mean, uncaring, unloving, miserable person in the sketches to a wisecracking old lady with underlying good intentions. This change shows how the Carol Burnett filmography kept shaping television even after she stepped away. Carol's divorce from producer Joe Hamilton limited her involvement in Mama's Family. Still, the sketch's influence lived on, showing how one raw, emotional performance could spark years of successful TV programming that reached way beyond its Carol Burnett 1950s roots. Carol Burnett didn't just make people laugh. Heartbreak, chaos, and family battles. Behind the scenes, her life was filled with tragedy, upheaval, and family feuds that would have crushed most people. It all began in college when she met her first husband, Don Soroya. They were young, in love, and both hoped to make it great in the show industry. He was born in Omaha in 1928 and had lofty Broadway dreams. They met at UCLA in 1952 and married 3 years later in 1955. But their love tale did not last. Don's daughter from the prior relationship died, and he was never the same. Carol's career skyrocketed while he faltered. The pressure shattered their marriage. They split on Christmas Day 1959 and divorced in 1962. Don battled depression and drinking until his death in 1990 at the age of 62. He never achieved the theatrical aspirations he previously had. Carol did not stay unmarried for long. She met Joe Hamilton shortly after. Joe was a well-known television producer who already had 8 children from his previous marriage. He had previously staged Carol's Carnegie Hall performance in 1962. They married in 1963 and collaborated on her famous program. They had 3 children, Carrie, Jody, and Aaron, and had a miscarriage in 1960. With Joe's 8 children and their home was constantly filled. He won 5 Emmys for producing Carol's program. However, as their professions advanced, their personal lives deteriorated. In 1976, the National Enquirer published a false report claiming Carol was inebriated at a restaurant while seated next to Henry Kissinger. That hurt her deeply, not just because it was incorrect, but also because she had spent years speaking out against drinking. She sued the tabloid for $1.6 million. The lawsuit lasted 5 years and showed how irresponsible tabloids can be. Carol was not intoxicated according to a hired source, yet the Enquirer nonetheless published the tale. She won the lawsuit, but after several appeals it was settled for around $200,000. It was not about the money. It was about clearing her name, and it altered tabloid journalism forever. However, the most important struggle of her life took place outside of the courtroom. It was at home. In the late 1970s, her daughter Carrie developed a heroin addiction. Carrie began taking cocaine, marijuana, mushrooms, and Quaaludes when she was just 13 years old. She eventually admitted to doing drugs so she could quit being Carol Burnett's daughter and become her own person. Carol watched as her kid died between 1976 and 1979. She admitted her to rehab following rehab. Carrie once ran away from a Texas institution. Carol believed she would lose her kid forever. Carrie finally became sober at the age of 17. But I did assassin was not assassin. Why would he shirt that's all that is the east side and I buy. Jeg kisser døse when Jim man and dan as unsem in the babs. Carol had to make the most difficult decision of her life. Carrie despised her for it, but as Carol once said, you have to love them enough to make them hate you. They didn't communicate for nearly a year, but she refused to give up. And when Carrie returned, they grew closer than ever. Carrie scored a huge part on the television series Fame, demonstrating that she had ability of her own. She and Carol worked together on film's episodes and eventually developed a play called Hollywood Arms based on Carol's story. They were connected at the hip, but tragedy struck again. Carrie died in 2002 from pneumonia, which was caused by lung cancer that had spread to her brain. She was just 38. She never got to watch the Hollywood Arms perform on stage. Carol was devastated, but she pressed on stating, I owed it to Carrie. Carol's second marriage ended in 1984. Carrie's addiction, the demands of their employment, and the emotional strain had worn down both her and Joe Hamilton at that point. They had sent their 2 younger kids to live in Hawaii so they would not see their parents' breakdown. After the divorce, Joe remained close to his family until his death from lung cancer in 1991. Carol, after 2 marriages and 2 devastating heartbreaks, found love again. In the late 1990s, she met Brian Miller while playing in Long Beach. He was 23 years younger, but it didn't matter. They married in 2001. She was 68 while he was 45. Carrie died only 2 months later. Brian assisted Carol in overcoming the most difficult period of her life. He encouraged her to finish Hollywood Arms, and they have remained together ever since. Carol and Brian stepped in when Carol's youngest daughter, Erin, was struggling with addiction and unable to care for her own kid. They acquired custody of Dylan, their grandson. Erin's addiction has resulted in a 19-year nightmare. She'd gone to rehab 8 times, totaling roughly 240 days. Erin's house became hazardous for her kid, prompting the courts to intervene. In July 2020, Erin threatened her children with suicide. Police had to intervene, and she was placed on mental hold. Carol soon became Dylan's guardian. Within weeks, the court granted Carol and Brian interim custody. She was once again stepping in to defend her family, even if it pained her heart. What do you think? Feel free to leave your comment below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.